welcome back to Off Ball Takes. All right, this is Yarby Laws, Christopher Wells, and we have a special guest on here, uh, KJ McDaniels, right? NBA player, played for the Philadelphia 76ers, Houston Rockets, Brooklyn Nets. How are you?
I'm good, man. Good, man. Happy to be a part of the show, man.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you for
problem.
coming on, man.
Yeah, we appreciate the
Sure.
time. All right. So I guess we'll get started. So obviously, when you went to college, you played at Clemson, right? What would you say was kind of the key to your success, at Clemson, and then also like later in the NBA, once you got drafted and got in there?
My key to success was discipline. Staying disciplined. I know what went there for. Clemson. Entrusted in me. Giving me a scholarship. Coach Brad, Coach Earl Grant. They believed in me, gave me a scholarship, and I know I need to go there and take care of business. And I knew I had a goal just from the beginning, even though it didn't start off the way I wanted it to. Like, you want to come in as a freshman and play the entire game, but you still have to work, stay disciplined, not get frustrated, with the playing time that you are getting as a freshman. Just gotta take it as it is, and I think discipline is what kept me on the right track. Those times, those days when I could have been out, doing whatever. I spent those hours in the gym. I took a few of my teammates, lifted me up as well. Just being in there and watching the guys ahead of me coming in my freshman year, that really helped out a lot too. Just seeing the seniors working out as much as they did, and they had a goal as well. So I feel like discipline was, and my family, like they've supported me. I feel like that's a big, they helped me get to where I am. A lot of people that grew up with me playing, they helped me get to where I am. So I feel like just discipline and just trying not to let them down. That's what kind of kept me going.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely like I don't know, it's just kind of interesting to hear what people say cuz it seems like a lot of people say like different things each time, but I think, you hit on a lot of like really solid points like discipline. I really think that would probably resonate with a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
gotta have, gotta have
exactly.
it 'cause it's easy to get distracted for sure.
Especially nowadays with social media and everything, everybody just wants to, have their 5 seconds of fame, but it's more about the grind and, you know, just getting better over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, social media. I mean, it was social media was a big thing when I was going into school too.
Yeah.
But it's not as easy as it is now with
Right.
social media. There was no TikTok. That's really the only thing. Everything else was still there, but I mean, it's real easy to get distracted. But I feel like you could either fall into them or you just take them for what it is
Yeah.
and keep grinding. That's
Yeah.
all I had to do.
Exactly. So I guess the next question that we want to ask is, was the college or NBA atmosphere more intense for you? Like playing in that conference in college or, NBA games. What made you like, you know, I guess, yeah, what was more intense?
Um, I'm gonna have to say professional.
Okay.
Yeah, playing professional, like it's you're a target. Uh, you have to like like I said, be able to fight those distractions off. A lot comes with that. Being a pro, you have to make sure eating the right things
Hmm.
and being prepared for the next game because you might have a back to back.
Right.
You usually have like days in between where you just get a day of rest and you right back to playing. In college, it's not really like that. Um, but both were, real intense. And then it's like the guys that you go up against, even in college, they're pros, they've been doing it and they got, they still got a lot to prove. And, for me, everybody's path is different
Sure.
and everybody route different. So you got to just kind of, love, respect yourself and run your route. And when you run into other people, you don't know how they came up. You don't know how, they take it serious, just as serious as you taking it.
Right.
They gonna come at your head every night, and it's
Hmm.
a different city. Like even as in college, it's different. Players that's trying to get to where you going. So I feel like once I got, to the NBA, it was real intense because I'm playing against people that I've watched for years before I got into the league.
Right.
Like, I think the first person that I was, kind of starstruck by was D Wade.
Okay.
When I played him, and I was like, wow, like, been watching D Wade, in my room when I was in high school, and coming face to face with him, having to guard him, it was crazy. And
Yeah.
he was still in his like prime. So, he was. That's probably the first person I was kind of like starstruck by. And they played a certain way. They knew how to get the calls. They knew like we were young, and we athletic. We want to come in and do a lot of high flying stuff, so hitting us with fakes and
Right.
everything. So yeah, I feel like the league is more intense.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely gone up in competitiveness and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like the guys now coming in, it's almost like that high school, like bouncing right out of high school into the league
Right.
era again. So, yeah, I love the game, so
Yeah.
I
So
can go on all day.
right, yeah. So I guess speaking of kind of the love for the game in a way. So what do you think was your most memorable game? In the NBA, or you can for Clemson if you like, but obviously you mentioned the NBA.
My most memorable game, in Clemson and in the pros. In Clemson, I think my most memorable game. Let me see. Wow, got a few moments. I think playing the school that my mom went to South. Not my dad went to South Alabama, but my mom went to ASU. We played Alabama State, and that was a memorable game for me because I'm like, that's my full school. We always
Yeah.
drive through there to go home. I had a good game against them too, and then I think playing against North Carolina.
Okay.
Growing up, we all like Jordan fans. We
Yeah.
all shoes. So, playing there was, crazy. I was matched up with Harrison Barnes then, and he kind of torched me. I was a freshman too, so he, that was a good game. That was a memorable game for me. And then the pros was probably my first game, um, my first official game. Like summer league was, amazing for me. I got a good opportunity to play against a lot of, you know, good younger guys and, second year guys. But I think my first game in Indiana, when I got my first points, that was like the most memorable moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really cool, I guess it's like really cool to also hear about your, experience, and it's like, your first NBA game, you're like, okay, I made it, pretty much. It's like this is the
Yeah.
beginning, so that's really cool. And speaking on that, take us through like what your daily training routine was like to kind of like prepare yourself for the NBA, because I think people underestimate and undervalue the amount of work that it takes to really get to the league.
Oh man, it's from, sun up to sundown.
Yeah.
Basically, when I'm in school, we wake up early, like 7 a.m. We probably eat a little bit. We get to the gym, eat a little bit, work out, before our classes even start. And that's what kind of got me into the mindset of like, okay, I know what I need to do,
Right.
get to the pros. And then when in the pros, get up, get to the gym probably about 2 hours, 3 hours before practice start, get in there, get a nice little workout in, a little lift, get some breakfast. And then we have practice, and then probably, stay a little bit after practice, get some work in. After that, go home, just get ready for the next day. Doing recovery. Recovery is a huge part for me.
Yeah.
Even to this day, like, I have to recover, and just take care of our bodies. That's the main thing, taking care of our bodies. Like, and I'm a big LeBron fan as well. And the way he takes care of his body, and I do a lot of, not research, but I do a lot of, just following, just seeing how they take care of the body, how he can
Right.
go for so long for that many years is amazing. And that's kind of the path I'm trying to be on as well. But Yeah, I mean it's from sun up to sundown, man. Just doing little things. It might be, working out twice a day. Getting up shots, even in the off season. It's waking up, getting some good food, and you getting the workout in. Getting shots up. Probably play a little pickup. And after that, you got to refuel again.
Yeah.
Work out a little bit after, get some shots up. Then I watch a lot of film as well. Like all I watch is basketball. Like I barely watch TV.
Right.
Even when I'm on my iPad, when I'm going to sleep, got my iPad right there beside me. My little stand. Just got old. I watch the old games too.
Yeah.
So it's a mix of the old and the new, and I love it.
Yeah.
And that's a part of it too. So
Yeah.
if you love it for real.
Yeah, I mean that's really cool. Just just because again, like I think when you look at a lot of the players, like when they put in the work in the off season, you don't always see like what the players do over the course of the entire summer, because like some guys, if they're not necessarily posting, you don't really know what they're doing, but it
Yeah.
always seems like they're always putting in all that work, like you said, in the gym, reviewing film, watching film, or like you said, just kind of just working out, like you mentioned, multiple times a day for some guys, including yourself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's something that people always kind of have to look at it, where it's not just, the regular season, where people are, kind of just playing, like it's a whole year round thing.
Yeah. Yearly, man. It's a lot of people that don't post. Like me, I'm one of them that don't really post that much when it comes to the off season. But it shows. It's people that do post a lot. And it's gonna show you the work, and then there's a lot of us that don't
Right.
feel like we have to post that. We just we at the end of the day we human beings. We regular people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, we all got our own route, different route. So it's sometimes some days or a week or so I might post a little bit of me being in the gym, but it's not an everyday life.
Right.
I'm
Yeah, and just because you don't post, that doesn't mean that you're not.
Yeah, it don't mean you're not putting in work.
Exactly.
And that's what I feel like that's what a lot of people look at too. When it comes to, scouts and stuff like that, I feel like they, look at what they posting, what they doing, where they at, who they around. But I mean, it's some that just don't do that. And I'm one of those that don't really feel like I have to post every single thing of me working out, but I definitely put my work in.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned you were kind of starstruck, by Wade, when you were playing against him, early on in your career. So, your favorite NBA player, growing up, so who was that, for you? Who was your favorite?
My favorite, man, I got so many different people that I like just admire and love watching play. I'm a big Jordan fan. Jordan, Kobe, LeBron. I don't really have a just one favorite that I just watch, but I watch all the good players, all the good role players. Like, I watch people that probably don't get as much exposure. But I was a big Jordan fan. But now, like LeBron, like he's doing things that nobody's ever seen. He does a little bit of everything on both ends. So I love watching him play. Just his leadership, and I'm a guy that likes to go out there and make the highlights, like dunks, blocks, threes. So I'm I think I'm my favorite player to watch.
That's a good answer.
Not on nothing cocky or nothing, but it's just
Yeah.
like to see how far like I've come just from people talking down on me, being like you ain't gonna be able to
Right.
play in the league, like that ain't gonna never happen. I'm like, that's fine, but hey, like I said, different routes. So, but yeah, I think my dad. I used to love watching my dad play when I was little. Like he played, and he wasn't able to pursue that professional career. So, I kind of do it because of him.
Right.
Most of that, and watching him play made me love the game. And then a lot of the guys that I grew up with, they played out in the front with me. We would be out there for nights, like, and we'd just be out there playing all night, and that's what made me like love it even more.
Yeah.
Was there a player, that you kind of like tried to model your game after, sort of like, when you were growing up, as you were kind of like, learning the game and developing all your skills?
Mm, Not really. Not really. It was just like I said, it's a mix of players that I used to watch.
Right.
So I used to like watching like Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett,
Right.
even though I probably knew I wouldn't be that tall. MJ, Kobe, Shaq, like everybody, a little bit of everybody. So it's not really one person I tried to model my game after, but like once I think I was in like my junior year, and I was like 6'4", 6'5". That's when I kind of started watching D Wade, like modeling after him. You know, LeBron, Carmelo, that '03 class.
Yeah.
Kind of a little bit of everybody in that class.
Yeah. So I guess like, you kind of already talked about it, like Chris said, with Dwayne Wade. But was there anybody you were like really excited to play against or like just maybe even meet, once you got to the league?
Let me see. I was excited to play Gerald Green.
Okay.
That was somebody that everybody would compare me to.
Right.
So I was excited to play him, Kawhi Leonard. And then like my rookie year, I got to play Tim Duncan as well. And that was crazy. Pau
That's so
Gasol,
cool.
like who else? Kevin Garnett, Joe Johnson, LeBron, like Jason Terry. I got to be on my teammate with Jason Terry. Got to play with James Harden, Dwight Howard, Corey Brewer, Trevor Ariza, Michael Beasley. Like, man, it was
It's a lot of
Monty.
people.
Yeah, it was a lot of people. Like Pat Beverly.
Yeah.
It was a Andrew Godlock. He played in the ABL.
Yeah.
Actually, and we still, cool. I try to keep in contact with most of them, but I got to play with a lot of guys, and I'm blessed for that.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And just take a little, take little notes from each one.
Right.
Yeah. So when you were playing in the NBA, did you have like a favorite city that you loved to play in? Like when you would get up and be like, oh man, yes, I'm excited to play.
A favorite city? Probably Atlanta, because I was close to home. So I get to see all my folks from back home in Birmingham, Mobile, even people in Atlanta. They come to the games, and I knew that was like a homecoming game for me. So I had pretty solid games when I came back to Atlanta, and that's close to home for me.
So by extension, did you have like a favorite arena as well, or was it the Hawks arena?
Favorite arena, man. I don't know. I don't think I have a favorite arena. Like, I mean, obviously when you playing, when you watching people like, the Lakers, Chicago Bulls, like, when you go play in Staples Center and you on that court, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, we used to watch this right here in 2000s where the Lakers would dominate.
Mm-hmm.
Shaq most dominant to ever play. It's like you get to play on that same floor that legends have played on. So I'm gonna have to say all of them.
Okay. And you've kind of had like a very interesting journey, I think, to the point where you've kind of seen it all in terms of all kinds of environments, all kinds of leagues. So, what is it like playing overseas versus playing in the league? Because like I feel like people undervalue also, that overseas play because I think there's a lot of talent around the entire world that may not get showcased.
Absolutely. First thing, to travel.
Right.
Super far. So, that's the main difference. But like once you go over there, like in the Philippines, they love basketball. That's their first sport.
Mm-hmm.
They love basketball over there. I didn't even know that. And I didn't know I had fans over there.
Right. Yeah.
And even when I was with Houston, we went to Shanghai. Like, I didn't know I had fans over there. They showed so much love. And I feel like, like you said, a lot of people don't get that exposure. But I feel like now it's getting kind of more out there. People starting to see like the overseas players, they nice.
Yeah.
But realistically, there ain't enough room in the league for everybody to be in there.
Exactly.
So, it's a lot of politics play a part too. But overseas, they love basketball. I feel like they probably appreciate basketball, a little bit more because here in the States, it's kind of more football oriented.
Yeah.
Especially in my state. in Alabama, it's a football state.
Oh yeah.
So everybody loves football. Even here, even in Georgia, like everybody loves
Mm-hmm.
football. So, yeah, man, I feel like the difference is just the travel. Like the level of play is there still. Like
Right.
people are, everybody probably not as athletic as everybody in the league.
Mm-hmm.
So you got like 6, 7 point guards, like six point guards my height that could do a little bit of everything. That'd
Mm-hmm.
probably be the only difference, just the athleticism. But people are skilled.
Okay.
Overseas, a lot of the guys I played with are very skilled. Um, so they just might not be as athletic, but that comes with age. Like you
Yep.
got young guys, 19, 20-year-olds that's athletic. You got guys over in the Philippines, Europe that might be in their 40s. They super skilled. They can still play. So that'd be my only difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like like Yarby said, like there's a lot of people don't always kind of like take into account, like there's a lot of, like you mentioned, really talented players overseas, even though it may be a different game than the NBA. That doesn't make it any less amazing, or any less difficult or anything like that. Because when you're a pro and you're really good, you're amongst the best in the world. So
Yeah.
that's something that I don't think a lot of people take into account.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the game is growing, man. It's evolving everywhere. And yeah, like I'm saying, the overseas guys, they talented, and I got respect for everybody that go overseas and play.
Sure. So you mentioned, or so obviously the NBA season, wrapped up a couple months ago. So we had that playoffs, where everybody was kind of following and watching what was going on. What were your kind of thoughts on the NBA playoffs? In terms of like, just from beginning to end. Did you have any like amazing moments that you saw, or like anything that surprised you, or what were your thoughts on the playoffs as a whole?
This year's playoffs, I mean, every year is exciting. There's new teams that come along. Like no, I feel like nobody was expecting Denver
No.
to, be the top dogs
Nope.
this year, but they had all the pieces to do it. When you look at their team, a lot of guys that's submit to new guys, and then there's guys that's been in the league for a minute. And I was surprised, honestly. Obviously, I was going for Miami just because it's closer, like it's part of the South for me.
Yeah.
So I was going for Miami, but I came in with Aaron Gordon. Uh, and I was super happy that he got a ring, and a lot of guys that Jokic, he was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And they deserved it, man. Like I'm happy. I think DeAndre Jordan on the team.
Yeah.
Jeff Green, like I was a big Jeff. I am a big Jeff Green fan,
Yeah.
and I'm glad to see that he got one too. As long as he's been in the league, he kind of remind me of LeBron.
Yeah.
Just how long he been playing, the athleticism, the
For sure.
size. But all around, it was good. I feel like a lot of teams coming along too. Like I feel like Memphis will probably be there. The Timberwolves,
Absolutely.
they got a good chance to be there. Obviously, LeBron and the Lakers, we'll see them. I feel like they're hopefully next year in the finals. But I mean, overall, it was fun, man. Miami, they got a lot of underdogs on that team, and I respect them. I respect Jimmy, Bam. They all play good, and it's just I feel like Denver probably had a little bit more experience,
Mm-hmm.
but for them to get that far, Caleb Martin, like all those guys, guys that have been in the G League, that's had to take a different route.
Yeah.
They found their way, and they stuck to the system, and but they made it to the finals, man, and got paid. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, take care of your family, and that's what they did.
Yeah. And I think that's what it's all about. And you've been saying pretty much this entire interview that everybody, takes different routes. But what advice would you give to a young person with aspirations to get into the NBA? Sort of like a send off,
Man, just staying disciplined, like I said from the jump. Keeping the right people around you, not being afraid to ask questions and ask for help. Because
Yeah.
that's kind of how I was. I kind of wasn't really a very vocal person. felt like I kind of always had to figure it out on my own. I could ask, a few people around me, for advice, but basically just staying out of trouble, staying focused on your goal,
Mm-hmm.
Keeping God first, praying, asking for, whatever you like, whatever you desire, like ask for it, but at the same time, you got to work.
Yes.
That's gonna that's gonna show the difference right there. And I know, like, people don't get exactly what they want. And my thing is, learning from your wins and learning from your losses. So you might come up short, but you got to find a way to get over it, get
Yeah.
around it, and keep grinding. Like some people, some people know a little few more people than others.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but as for myself, I didn't know that many people coming into, the NBA world. But it's like I've been saying, you gotta love and respect your route, respect yourself, and run your route. You
Yeah.
can't worry about nobody else's route, how they got there, like why they do this, how they get there so fast. And I'm, having everybody route different.
Right.
So, you just gotta respect yourself and run your route. That's my thing. And just stay disciplined, stay out of trouble, man. That's really the only thing, because there's a lot of distractions out there.
Yes.
It's gonna try to knock you off your path. So my thing is staying on track. Like, just stay on track. It's a lot of, don't try to live too fast
Right.
or do stuff too fast. Just do it correctly, and it'll all come.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to, send it off.
For sure, my brother.
Yeah, so exactly. So KJ McDaniels, thank you for your time. We appreciate, the interview that you gave us, so
For sure, man.
great.
I appreciate that, fellas. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir.
And I'll see y'all soon, man.
Yeah. We hope you enjoyed our interview with KJ McDaniels. Please support him as well by following his Instagram and X. We're forever grateful to him for allowing us to be the platform to share bits and pieces of his story and journey. So once again, shout out KJ for being a real one. We do have to also talk about our next offseason team, the Memphis Grizzlies. This is the same series that we've been doing, but this is the last team in the Southwest Division. So we'll keep you guys updated on what's next, and you'll see in the next episode what the next division will be. But as for Memphis, this is a team I think that we place very high expectations on coming into the season. And then also they really, I guess, elevated those expectations by their stellar play throughout the majority of this season. They won this Southwest Division. They finished first in it. Albeit there were some, I guess, like weaker teams in this division, but nonetheless, they finished with the second best overall record in the West. So, hats off to them for having a great season. But, it didn't come without some issues, off the court, some behavioral things going on with Dillon Brooks. You guys know the story. We don't really need to cover that. But then fast forward to playoffs, they got bounced and it didn't really look good. They just couldn't really win against the Lakers, and that's the unfortunate reality. I think they're just so young, and when they came up against, LeBron and Anthony Davis, they just didn't have what it took. They were missing Steven Adams, Brandon Clark as well, so they were missing some size and some pieces that definitely would have potentially helped them get over the hump, but still, it just wasn't enough, and then Ja also got hurt. But then fast forward to the offseason, if we look at this, they haven't really done that much, in my opinion. If we go back to June, they traded, some stuff to Boston, and then they did get Marcus Smart, which is good. I think that was a great move. I think that was something that they really did replace Dillon Brooks and got to upgrade. Marcus Smart is a great defender. Offense can be a little shaky at times, but he's also more of a locker room leader. So I think this will help mature the Memphis Grizzlies, because I think one of their factors that made them a little less desirable around the league was definitely their immaturity and youth. So it's good to see them get a veteran who's been to the finals before and has been on a winning team as well. So I think that's a great move. And then coming into July, they re-signed Desmond Bane to a rookie extension. Great deal as well. And they got Josh Christopher from Houston. I think that was great too. Josh Christopher has shown some promise coming out of college, but hasn't really shaped out to be, one of those gems or something like that you would find in the second or late first round, but, still nonetheless a great player. Then they traded 3 future second round draft picks to the Phoenix Suns 4 Isaiah Todd, and 2 future first-round draft picks. So, once again, they acquired another young player who showed some promise with the Wizards, but didn't really get some playing time. So I'm sure he'll get a little opportunity, but I don't know how I feel about that. But in general, kind of a quiet one, but I think Marcus Smart is definitely the biggest splash that they made. And I think, that would push their grade very high for me once we get to that. Then let's see what else. Looking at their roster, it's a very similar team to last season. They still have all the youth, all of that. If we look at it, Steven Adams, obviously, Santi Aldama, Desmond Bane. Now they have Josh Christopher, Brandon Clark, Gigi Jackson Jr. I don't think, we were talking about it before. I don't think that he has signed his actual contract, but he was drafted in this year's draft. And then Jaren Jackson Jr., Luke Kennard, John Conchar, Jake LaRavia, Kenny Lofton Jr., Ja Morant, David Roddy, Derrick Rose, Marcus Smart, Xavier Tillman, Zaire Williams, Isaiah Todd. So, like I said, pretty much same roster, just added a couple of young guys, and Marcus Smart. So what have your thoughts been on this? Because I know, we've talked about Memphis a lot, and we think that, they struggled a little bit due to Ja being out for his behavior, and I think that'll also translate into the next season as well. But, now that they're free of Dylan Brooks and his antics, not to say that he was the reason that they lost, in the playoffs or got bounced early, but, now that that's not really looming on this team and, their shoulders, what do you think of this roster? Because I think it's pretty solid. I just don't know if they'll go, number 2 again.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, because for all the playoff issues, they were one of the best teams in the league last year.
Sure.
I do think Marcus Smart, like you mentioned, is an upgrade. In the locker room, a guy that's had a lot of playoff experience, right? It is kind of interesting, right? Because he had been a guard, obviously in Boston, assuming he starts alongside Ja and Desmond Bane, right? That means he's going to be more of I guess, a wing. But, I think he is better guarding bigger guys than he is guarding, smaller players,
Sure.
in my opinion, just because he's, a strong physical guard, considering he's what, 6'4"-ish.
Sure.
But, he's a big 6'4" guy, right? Famously he was I think Boston at one point used to put him on Porzingis when he would play against them, so not that you would normally want him doing that, but obviously he's got some versatility.
He's got
defensively.
Quick hands.
Yeah, exactly. In addition to that, right, you also just kind of factor in, like you mentioned, the Josh Christopher trade, right? I think that was in the Dylan Brooks sign and trade.
Yes.
Right. So they got, I think, mainly a trade exception back, right? So pretty decent size. So you may be able to bring somebody in. Teams don't always use that, but it's there just in case you need it. But outside of that, like you said, I think a lot of it you're kind of also looking for internal development from a lot of these players, right? Like Desmond Bane, he had that stretch, I think, before his injury to start the season where he was, basically playing at an all-star level.
Yeah.
Right. Then he got hurt and was still good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, obviously, you would imagine he continues to get better as he signs, that big contract. Ja Morant, right? He's still very young, right? 23. So you'd imagine he's going to get better. Jaren Jackson Jr., right? Defensive Player of the Year last year, right? You'd imagine he gets better.
Yes.
So, obviously if, one of those guys outside of Ja reaches another level, right, then that obviously can kind of change the fortunes of this team, right? Because you're not expecting some of these other guys, to get significantly better, right? Like Steven Adams is what he is,
right?
Marcus Smart is what he is, right? But I mean, you have a few guys where maybe there'll be more rotational guys like Aldama,
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody like that, David Roddy, Xavier Tillman, right? So they have a decent number of guys on the roster. I'm kind of looking at it again as another team where maybe you try to also make a splash at the deadline, right? And maybe you can kind of take some of those other contracts and, make it into something. But, Dylan Brooks was the salary you would have used, last offseason or last season, but now you don't have that, right?
Right.
It's Marcus Smart. So we'll see. But like you said, I did like most of the moves that they made. Like I said, I think a lot of it's a combination of internal development, and again, the extra added leadership. And I think you also got to factor in, there's, a potential for them to kind of learn from what happened last year, right? I think, they made a lot of mistakes in terms of, like you said, the immaturity. And again, there's nothing wrong with having confidence, right? But,
Right.
I think they kind of took it to another level. with the comments about like, we're fine in the West, or I think Dylan Brooks before the playoffs mentioned like, yeah, let's play the Lakers so we can just get them over with, which, that's not that controversial, right? But still,
Yeah.
sometimes you got to be careful what you wish
They
for.
just got humbled.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I think that can, be a positive for teams, right? Where
Sure.
it's like, okay, we had, what happened last year, right? But, let's try to make sure that that doesn't happen
Yeah.
again this time around, right? Because again, these guys are young,
Hmm.
as a core, right? I mean, again, like I mentioned, Ja Morant, basically like 23.
Yep.
I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr., right? Basically what, 24, I
I think
think.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Desmond Bain, right? I think he's 25 or something like that. So I mean, like all these guys are very young and
Hmm.
haven't even really entered their prime yet. So, you kind of have to factor that in. One thing, in terms of like, when we look at their season going in, because it's kind of funny because we've talked about the other teams that we think will be at the top, but they were the number 2 seed.
Sure.
Obviously, a factor that's going to be a little bit difficult is, the Ja suspension, right? Because he's going to be out for 25 games. That's basically, like a third of the season, which is, pretty tough.
Hmm.
Um, in terms of that's a long time, right? The first year that he missed all that time, right? When I think they were like what 20-5 2 seasons ago without him. Last season they were 11-10, right? So
Yes.
last season they were basically, a little over 500 when he was out, which is kind of what you would normally expect,
Expect, right.
from a team when your best player is out. Um, but their schedule, because the schedules just dropped. Obviously you're watching this. If you're watching this on Friday, but the schedules just came out today. So
Yes.
you look at Memphis' schedule and like it's a very West heavy schedule. The first 25 games,
Hmm.
like I'll just kind of go through some of the teams they play. Right, I see like New Orleans, Denver. The Wizards are their third game, but then after that, right, like Dallas, Utah, a couple of Portland games, Miami, Utah again, both LA teams, the Spurs, the Celtics, the Rockets, Phoenix, Minnesota a couple of times, right? Houston a couple of times, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, right? So there's not very many Eastern Conference teams.
Sure.
Um, and then I think they end with the Pacers and the Hawks. So, there's this the start of the season I think schedule wise is going to be pretty important for them because again, you'd assume if they're going to be somewhere around 500 without Ja, well, there are some tough teams in this schedule,
Yeah.
but like at the same time, like some of these teams like you probably should beat. Like they should beat Portland. They should beat Houston. They should beat like the Spurs or somebody like that, right?
Even
Because
Utah, I would think.
yeah, even Utah, same thing. But the problem is that without Ja, right, all of a sudden, like the likelihood that you might lose a game or two that you're not that you shouldn't lose is higher.
Right.
So they kind of need to be, I'm not at obviously we don't need we're not asking them to be 20-5 like they were
Sure.
last season without Ja, but they need to be pretty solid, I think, to kind of make up because if they lose some of these games out of the gate, right, that's going to be tougher to make up, right? Because like I mentioned, like a couple of tough matchups that they play, right? Like I mentioned, they play the Suns a couple times, they play both LA teams once, but you still play all those other teams, at least one or two or even three more times.
Right.
So that's something that you got to factor in, right? Like they don't play the Warriors in that span. They don't play the Kings in that span, right? They don't play a lot of the top East teams in that span, right? Like I didn't like, I mentioned Boston, but and I guess Miami's there as well, right? But no Milwaukee, or Philly or Cleveland or somebody like that. So, I think that's kind of important for them to start off. And obviously, without Ja, right, you're kind of assuming, that Marcus Smart is going to kind of step in
Yeah,
and
I was
sort of
gonna
take
say
that
that.
point
Yeah.
guard role. But then it's like, after that, right, who's at the small forward spot, right? Because, that's kind of my question, going into the season where obviously we know they're going to be without Ja for a while. Tyus Jones was kind of the steward at that backup point guard spot. But now I guess it's kind of Marcus Smart, but his role is going to be a little bit different, than it was in Boston, right? Because in Boston, you had, Tatum and Brown, as the wings, and they were kind of like the primary scorers,
Hmm.
for that team, but they needed Marcus Smart's like playmaking and decision making. But, once Memphis is healthy, you don't need as much of that because you have Ja and Desmond Bain, that can kind of, that will be handling the ball, and Ja will obviously handle some playmaking as well. So that'll kind of allow Marcus Smart to, do some other more, I guess, secondary things kind
Yeah.
of,
And I think
right?
they'll probably, you know, funnel his game back more into 100% defense, you know?
Right. So yeah, but that's kind of something I'm kind of intrigued by. And then obviously, we forgot to mention it, but Brandon Clark, I believe, he tore his Achilles pretty late last year, so he's gonna be out, I think, for most of this season.
Yes.
So that's, kind of takes away one of your backup bigs, and that's the guy that they would kind of tend to put out in those small ball lineups. So, maybe that means more Xavier Tillman minutes, or maybe that means more Jaren Jackson Jr. at the 5, right? Because, he did spend a lot more time at the center spot last year, once Steven Adams was out.
Yes.
And he did pretty well, again, like, he's got some, factors, right? Not a great rebounder, but his efficiency went up, right? Because he got, some more, he developed more of his interior game, right? Because, when he first came in, he was kind of mainly just like popping and, taking a lot of jumpers, but now he's kind of expanded his offensive repertoire. Because against the Lakers for most of the series, he was really good,
Yeah.
because we kind of mentioned in that series that he was going to be a big X factor against the Lakers, right? If he was in foul trouble like he had been for much of his career, that would have been a problem. But he was able to kind of keep that in check for the most part, and that's kind of what you would like to see, out
Yeah.
of young guys as they continue to develop. Um, then I guess you're kind of also hoping one of these other guys that they've drafted, because they've haven't made like a ton of trades, right? Much of their roster, they had grabbed from the draft. Obviously they made a couple trades recently, right? But you're kind of looking at one of these other guys, right? Like Jair Williams was decent as a rookie, but he hasn't really done much the last season or so. Can another one of these guys maybe take a step up, right? Like a Jake LaRavia, or Santi Aldama, or even like a Lofton Jr. or somebody like that, or a Roddy, right? Because Roddy was
Right.
kind of like forced into the playoffs, which he probably wouldn't have played as much, if they were, closer to full strength. But still, that's kind of what you're looking for as well. But, either way, like I said, I do like overall what they did for most of the offseason. Like you said, it feels like, maybe it would be nice if they did a little bit more. But again, it's another team where now the roster is pretty expensive, with Ja, with, next year Desmond Bain will make a ton of money.
Right.
Not the season, right, but the season after is when his extension starts, right? And then Jaren Jackson Jr. paying a decent amount of money for that. So, it's I don't know, because like I feel like it's another one of these situations where, again, you're probably one more trade piece away. But I do like the team, and I think they should be more mature. Like I mentioned, for a number of reasons, right? Marcus Smart. They even brought in Derrick Rose. That's another
Right.
guy.
It's another vet.
Been in the league for a while, right? And again, he was the number one pick. He was an MVP on his way to being a perennial superstar, and then he tears his ACL, but he's still hanging around.
Right.
From that 2008 draft, right? There's not very many guys from that draft class left. So I mean, that's something that I think you got to factor in as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it is interesting, right? Because again, like Memphis was the number 2 seed, but it doesn't feel like they've been in the discussion. When we talk about, like a lot of the teams that we kind of expect to be able to come out of the West.
I think people
Uh,
wrote them off after that
yeah,
disaster of a performance in the first round.
right. And I just think it's, with a young team, you can't write a young team off.
I agree.
Because of that age factor. It doesn't mean that I think that they'll go, all the way to the finals, but
Don't be
you know,
surprised.
yeah, like yeah, I mean, there's a world where they make a deep playoff run. I mean, because again, they've had good stretches at times, right? 2 seasons ago, they took the Warriors right to 6 games, and Ja was hurt for about half of that series. So I mean, you got to factor that in as well. So there's a path for them to take the next step forward. Again, it's just they're a little bit smaller, I think, with the injuries, and then with, Dylan Brooks being gone. So that's something that I kind of wonder, but they should, I think, be a little bit better offensively.
Yeah.
Um, or at least, you have a little bit more versatile guys, right? Luke Kennard, is probably going to play a decent amount as a shooter. I mean, you can hide him defensively because you have other good defensive players, but, like I said, I do think that they probably still need another, like guy to trade for. Like consolidate and maybe move some of those young guys who probably won't be like super significant difference makers, and maybe turn that into something. And then you're really cooking, because I do like a number of the guys on the roster, right? Like
I
I
like
like
this roster a
yeah,
lot.
like I like their core guys, and I like a decent amount of their role players. Again, it's just they have a lot of guys, and I think some of those guys probably could benefit. They could probably benefit from moving some of them.
Sure.
Uh, but I do think they have the makings of a really good team. I think they might have kind of crossed into the underrated aspect now,
Yeah.
where I think some people may have felt that they were overrated last year.
They're still going to do great, I think, in their division as well. I think they'll probably come out on top. I think probably their only like maybe I guess competition in their division would maybe be like I guess New Orleans or Dallas, but who knows with both of those teams, especially with New Orleans and their injury history, and Dallas may, self implode. But I think Memphis is probably the solid pick to come out of the Southwest Division.
Yeah, because I mean, and again, like when you look at their regular season stuff, like you mentioned, they were great. They were great on the defensive end. Their main
Hmm.
weakness was the offense.
Shooting.
Um, yeah, exactly, shooting, right? And you got a couple of guys to help you out, right? Luke Kennard, right? Obviously, he's a good shooter. Marcus Smart, hit or miss, right? So probably may not help you much there. But I think again that gives you another smart playmaker type guy, right? And ideally his real role within the Memphis offense, right? He's not going to be taking quite as many like bad shots down the stretch. Just because you have other guys on the roster, right, who are going to be handling the ball in crunch time, right? Because
Sure.
like with Boston, like that was kind of what I always thought their weakness was kind of like the guard play at times, just because again you didn't have like a guy that was like a all right, let's
A
kind of
true guard.
settle the offense, and kind of like get somebody, and set somebody up for something. And Smart can kind of do that, right? But again, like there are you probably don't want the ball in his hands all the time in crunch time.
Right.
Whereas now with Memphis, you got Ja and Desmond Bain that can do that. Um, you know, and they can handle that load offensively. So
Right.
you know, I think that's something to factor in as well. I think Smart will have a really good year,
Me too.
for Memphis because I think he fits in pretty well. It's just going to be interesting to see because again he's a different player from Dylan Brooks, but he does bring he still brings some of that toughness. But I think like there's not quite as much boneheadedness that you see out of Marcus Smart, even though like sometimes he can do you know silly goofy stuff, right? But it's not the same as Brooks, especially because
Absolutely
he's
not.
got more of a resume. Because he's been on a team that's made a lot of deep playoff runs and an NBA Finals appearance. So
Yes. And like my thing is, I think they're also really banking on Ja to make another huge leap as well.
yeah,
And I think one thing I think that he's really underrated at is definitely like not so much 3-point shooting, but I think steadily increasing his percentage. We've seen him jump from the 20s to the 30s. So I'm looking at like some stats right now. He basically shoots around like 4.9, so basically 5 3-point attempts per game, right? I would want to see him continue to take 5 threes, but I want to see it more in the 35% range, 37.
right.
I know that's a tall ask. That's a huge jump in percentage, but I think he's capable of doing it. We've seen him jump from like 27 to 30 before. So, if he can jump from 30 to 35, I think that would be really solid for him, and that would help them out tremendously.
Right, because like last year, I think he shot just under 31% from three. The
Yes.
year before, it was 34.
Yeah.
So but like you said, it's more attempts, but hopefully the efficiency goes up. And I think also like maybe if he can add a little bit of skill around the rim, not that he doesn't have any skill, right? But like, there's certain types of shots that like, once it was playoff time,
Too
he
sporadic.
wasn't as consistently, because like some of the Lakers games, he was just going crazy from three, which
Yeah.
is, not normally his strength. And that's kind of something that's, can kind of just be up and down in a playoff series, right?
Sure.
Because again, I think one game, I think he had like what 6 or 7 threes, in one of those games against the Lakers. I think, I think it might have been game three. I think it was whatever game where like the Lakers had that huge lead, and then after a while, like Memphis was kind of like there, but like they never got back
Right.
in it. I think it was that game,
Yeah, I believe
where
you're
he
right.
had like the 5 or 6 or some ridiculous 3-point barrage in the fourth quarter or something like that. And
Yeah.
so I think, again, like you mentioned, another leap from him continuing to add to his game on both ends. And again, you got Marcus Smart, who, in theory should be able to show him, some things or maybe kind of like preach more effort defensively. Again, he's not, Ja's probably not the guy you want to put on people late in games, but, with his athleticism, right, like there's no real reason for him to be like, a guy that you have to hide defensively.
Right.
Um, so that's another area where I think he can take some strides. And again, he's a young guy, so he should continue to get better. It's just again, we're not going to see him for a while. All right, I just checked; he's 24, just turned
Yeah.
24 about a week ago.
Yep.
But either way, um, again, 25 games, that's a long time. Like I mentioned, that's about a little less than a third of the season, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, he like it's a lot of it is going to be based off of what can Memphis do while he's out. Because if they kind of hold on and hang around and they're doing okay, right, then they'll probably be fine, right? But if they kind of start off the gates really rough, it's going to be tough because again, there's a lot of good teams in the Western Conference. Every night it's going to be like, a battle. And without Ja, that makes the battle tougher. Because again, because like I mentioned, they have multiple games against Houston. They play Houston 3 times, and that's a team that you would think, all right, if they're at full strength, they should beat Houston, like all 3 times, or maybe 2 out of 3, right? But
Mhm.
without them, right, there's a world where it's like, oh no, we lost to Houston 2 times out of the 3 matchups, and maybe those 2 losses all of a sudden prevented us from being, whatever favorable seed matchup we want, or
Well,
something like that.
the what I have to say on that is kind of like I think I would be more nervous if they didn't have Marcus Smart. I think Marcus Smart is
Right.
probably going to play the point guard while Ja is
Yeah.
out, and I'm not too concerned with his point guard play. If you want me to be like
No.
100% real, so
Right.
I'm not like saying like that I think they're gonna like win every single game. I think they're gonna lose probably some that they should have won, if Ja was in the lineup. But I'm not too concerned to the point where I think they're gonna fall and it's like, they have a horrible start. I think they're gonna have like a mediocre start, but not a horrible one.
Yeah, because again, they were a game above 500 without him
Right.
last year. So if it's something similar to that, right, it'll probably be fine.
Yeah.
I'm curious who starts at the wing spot if without Ja, just because again, like Smart moves in as the guard and Dylan Brooks is out. So who's the other person that they start alongside?
It would
Smart and Payne?
probably be one of the bigger guys. And by that I mean like Kenny Lofton or maybe Roddy. I would probably say Roddy maybe. I don't know. Because I don't think Gigi Jackson's ready. I don't think, Zaire Williams is ready either. So I don't know.
Yeah, you think they might get kind of freaky and like maybe start like a Luke Kennard or somebody like
That
that?
that that could be possible. I think that would also help their shooting as well. And I think, having Marcus Smart in there, would kind of be able to mask him a little bit. Probably put Marcus Smart on whoever Kennard would normally be guarding, or if they play a zone or something like that. I don't know. I think, but that would be interesting, to see Kennard out there because he does provide a great jump shot. So
Because like I said, that's it's just obviously you're not going to be able to completely make up for what you lose with Ja. It's
oh
just
no, no,
you got to figure out ways to not completely fall off. So
yeah,
that's what I'm thinking. Because like I said, I think like you said, their start will probably be okay. Because I don't expect them to come firing out of the gates, especially because again, 25 games is a long stretch of basketball. And based off of the schedule, which again, everybody check out, just came out, on Thursday, right? It's not like the worst first 25 games they could have had, but I think you probably would have preferred like a slightly different one because again, it's very heavy with Western Conference teams.
sure.
And you're pretty much playing most of the teams that are kind of around in the Western Conference. Again,
And
there's
in your
some
division too.
yeah, and the ones in your division. Again, like you should beat Utah, you should beat Houston. Um, and maybe you should beat Dallas. You never know because again, if they're kind of at full strength, but Memphis is without Ja, we'll see. But they're that I think will be kind of something to follow. As that stretch of the season goes on, just because again,
Absolutely.
it's pretty important. Is to start off relatively well. But again, you got from the 1 seed to the 10 seed to make the playoffs. So
Yeah.
I think that's something you kind of have to factor in.
Yeah, they got to work on that.
Yeah. So, I guess where do we expect this team to be, by the end of the season, right? Because again, they were in the first round last year and lost in 6 as the higher seed to the Lakers. The year before, right, they got to the second round and lost to Golden State in 6 games, right? And then I think their first playoff basketball, right, they lost in the first round. They were the 8th seed to the Jazz, right? So I mean, it'll like I said, I think there's definitely a world where they, go past the first round, right? I think, like I
Yeah,
said,
it's
like with many
possible.
of these teams, it depends on the matchup, depends on health. Um, and again, like I don't expect them to be a 2 seed, only because again, Ja's gonna be out the first 25 games, so I expect them to lose, some games here or there. Maybe they could bounce back, the last stretch of games, but I don't expect them to be like a top 2 or 3 seed. But I think that they can get past the first round. Um, Conference finals, I don't know. Like I said, as currently constructed, I think they need a little bit more.
Hmm.
But like I said, I do like the core of guys, so I definitely think they are capable of making a deep playoff run. They wouldn't be like they wouldn't be like one of the favorites in the Western Conference, I don't think.
Mm-mm.
But I do think that they are a team where I think people, have kind of, forgotten, like, 2 seasons ago they were pretty good and it looked like they were on the come up. They just got to get their guys back, under control and get them rolling again. And I do think that there is a world where they can make the conference finals. I don't know if they will, um, but it all depends, right? Because again, if all of their young guys take a big leap, right, then they're probably going to make a deep playoff run. But if, they're kind of about the same as they were last year, right, then, it probably won't be too much different,
Right.
unless they get a more favorable matchup. So, like I said, I think this is another one of those teams where, like, there's a lot of variance for how it could go. Like, I don't think they're good enough to win the championship, but I do think they're certainly good enough to win at least a round, or maybe two in the playoffs if if they get the right matchup.
Well, for me, I think they're going to avoid the play-in
Yeah.
100%. I think they're going to skirt past that. I don't think they're going to be in that situation. And I think, their peak is probably ideally the Western semis. That's what I'm probably going to go with.
Okay.
I don't want to give them like too much, I guess I don't want to glaze them too much and say they're going to the Western Conference Finals. I think that's just unrealistic. Considering how good the West has gotten, I just think there's a couple more teams that I would give the edge to over them. So
Right.
that's why I'm putting them where they are, and that's not a bad thing at all. I don't think that's
Yeah.
writing them off. I think writing them off would be saying they're a play-in team at best,
Yeah.
or like first round team. I think we're gonna steadily see them improve. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm probably gonna go with is definitely the
Uh,
semis.
yeah. So I think we're kind of basically in the same spot because, like I
Absolutely.
said, I think their ceiling is probably the second round. Um, you know, really constructed because again,
Yeah.
if they make some type of trade and acquire somebody at the deadline, or something like that, then yeah, it can change.
Yes.
But I think for now with the roster they have, and that's kind of what we have to base it on. I think that's probably their best case scenario,
Yeah.
right? Because like most likely scenario, it depends on the matchup, right? Because they could go out in the first round again if they
Sure.
place certain teams. But I do think that they should be once they're full, they should be better equipped than last season. I think
Mm-hmm.
once they're whole, just because again, you got humbled, so you should put that experience, in your mind, right, as you continue to progress. Like you mentioned, I expect their young guys will continue to get better. It's just a matter of again, every other team improved in the Western Conference for the most part in some way as well. Um, and I don't feel like they were the number 2 seed last year, but I don't think they were the second best team in the Western Conference. So that's kind of the main thing for me. But I'm kind of with you, where like I said, I think ceiling is probably second round. But it wouldn't shock me if they went out in the first round again.
Yeah.
Just,
I
it
get you.
just kind of depends. But I do think they should avoid the play in. But I do think for the first 25 games, it wouldn't shock me if they were like in play in territory. But
Sure.
like you said, once Jock comes back, they should be
They'll be smooth sailing, I think.
yeah, exactly. So I guess like we've continued to do. What grade would you give the Memphis Grizzlies for how their offseason has been? Because again, we got to factor in draft, free agency, and all that other good stuff. So what grade would you give 'em?
Well, here's what I'm gonna say to preface my grade: quality over quantity. For me, this is a good offseason. They didn't do much, but I think the moves that they did make were great moves. So, I'm gonna give them a solid B. And I think getting Marcus Smart to replace Dylan Brooks is a S tier move. It's a great move. That's the exact like kind of things that you want to see from your front office. Re-signing Desmond Bain to a long-term rookie scale extension, all that stuff, great. And then also, acquiring Josh Christopher as well. And then also their draft picks as well. I think that puts them in the B range because, their draft pick wasn't horrible at all. So they picked a guy that has some promise and some potential. Just picked the wrong basketball program for college, I think. But in general, I like their moves, and I think it definitely made them better because they got rid of Brooks.
Yeah, I think I agree with you where I'm in the B territory, right? Because we were a little bit more critical of New Orleans, where we mentioned like they just didn't really do anything.
Sure.
And like you said, Memphis didn't make huge moves, but I do like the moves they made. Like, because like you mentioned, the Marcus Smart trade is great. Because like I said, it gives you more veteran experience.
Hmm.
A guy that does help you, I think, just kind of settle down some things at times.
Yes.
Exactly. Like I think that's a good move. And then you just kind of have to factor in, like you mentioned, the other stuff as well. Like, 'cause, Dylan Brooks, it's it's not that he's a bad basketball player. It's just at times they were relying on him too much.
Exactly.
Late in games, and that's probably not ideally what you want to do, right? Like at times, like I mean, the teams were just leaving him open, right? Like that was the Lakers' strategy for him was just to back off him and dare him to shoot, and it worked. And again, like if he makes those shots, all right, right. But what was the likelihood he was going to make them? He was
Right.
under 40% from the
He
field.
got exposed in the playoffs pretty much.
Exactly. So that's something you kind of have to factor in. The Josh Christopher thing, I'm fine with taking a gamble on a young guy that so far, hasn't really, done a whole lot. Because like you mentioned, the draft picks also, that's fine. Again, he's Gregory Jackson's not a guy that's going to play a whole lot for them.
Sure.
But just as a project guy, right? They've had good experience in terms of picking guys. They've drafted a lot of guys that have been very productive for them, right? Including Ja, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr., right? All three of those guys are, very good NBA players.
And Lofton's on the come up.
Yeah, exactly.
A little
And
bit.
right, and some other guys, that they drafted as well. I mean, like even Dylan Brooks was fine, for what he is.
Right.
And some of the other guys, right? Tillman, Brandon Clark, right? They've done a really good job drafting a lot of, quality players that have been able to contribute.
Yes.
They gave up, those two firsts, I believe, in the Marcus Smart trade, right? But I think one of them, was, I who did what did Boston do with that pick? Didn't they trade it like a bajillion times or
I
something?
think so. They just
Remember.
took
Yeah, I
turns
don't
with
even
it.
remember where it ended up, but like they again that guy, whoever it was, probably wasn't going to play a whole lot for Memphis. And then I think the other first, right, was the Warriors first that they got from that Iguodala trade way back,
Yeah.
a few seasons ago. So that wasn't even their own first. So it's not like you're giving up a ton for Marcus Smart, right? It is two firsts, right? But one of them was your own in this year's draft, which wouldn't have as much value as one a few years from now, and then the other one was not even their own. So.
But they also did get two future first round draft picks back, I think, from the Isaiah Todd deal.
Oh, from Todd? Oh, yeah. It was the pick swaps, right?
Yes.
Weren't they like pick swaps? Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pick swaps.
So they traded 3 future second round picks, and then they got Isaiah Todd, and then the 2 future firsts.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So overall, like you said, I think they had a really good, really solid offseason. Like you said, no, off the wall. This is I didn't see this one. Well, I guess that one.
Marcus Smart, I don't think anybody saw that coming.
Yeah, I guess I mean it more from the perspective of like not a superstar move.
Sure. Like
but
a
I think
huge splash.
Yeah, but I think a sensible move that will make them better. So, like you said, overall, I like the moves they made because we talked about it when they first did this trade, where I think we said we liked this deal from Memphis the most.
Yes.
Right? Because it was the deal was between the Wizards and the Celtics and the Grizzlies, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was Porzingis going to Boston.
Yep.
Smart going to Memphis.
Yep.
And then it was Tyus Jones going to the Wizards. So yeah, and then along with picks or whatever.
Sure.
And I think we said we liked it for Memphis the most, and then I think we said Wizards second.
Mm-hmm.
So and obviously we'll get to the Wizards and Celtics later on, but still, we like this for Memphis.
Yes,
so
we love it.
I think I give it B plus. I think they had a pretty good offseason. Compared to what they could have done, right? Because they could have just ran it back, paid Dylan Brooks like $20 million a year, and then probably wouldn't have been the most amazing thing.
Yeah, first NBA player to get fired.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it is kind of fascinating just how all that occurred, right? Because again, like it was right after they got eliminated where you just started hearing stuff about like
oh
Memphis
god,
under no circumstances will Dylan Brooks be a Grizzly.
Like holy cow.
Yeah,
first time in NBA history, man.
Yeah, I've not heard that before. So we'll see. We'll see what he does. Outside of Memphis, but this is a Memphis, segment right now. So like I said, I like what they did in the offseason. I think that they can make a deep playoff run, but I think it's probably more likely, that they are. I think they're more likely to go out in the first round than they are to get past the second round.
Sure, I agree.
Yeah. So I mean. That's pretty much it. I mean, there's no real news or rumors to speak of. Obviously we already talked about, the Harden, elements, in regards to all that drama, right? So check the previous episode, if you haven't already done so, to continue to see our thoughts on that. But outside of that, yeah, that pretty much wraps up today's episode of Off Ball Takes. We also hope you enjoyed our interview with KJ McDaniels, right? We appreciate, him taking his time to do it with us.
Yes.
So exactly. So, hopefully everybody has, a great weekend and we'll see you next week.